right, well, this is the topic at hand. The podcast is, the lowdown on low dosing, and this is the what is low dosing section. So this is the heart of it all here. Now, on the off chance you have been one of those viewers that just jump right down to this one, I'm going to hit some of the important points from the other sections and segments, but really, I'm here to encourage responsible education, the responsible use of cannabis, and I highly recommend, if you're looking at cannabis in low doses, that this is not the only segment that you view. In particular, I highly recommend that you take a look at the methods of administration segment as really kind of minimum level of education here. However, I will try to point out some of the key points as we go forward. So what is low dosing? Low dosing is consuming cannabis at doses that really optimize the effect profile and mitigate the side effect profile. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the effects of cannabis. So generally speaking, cannabis will produce a state of relaxation. It's going to be a mood uplifter. It's going to be anti-inflammatory. It's going to help reduce pain. There are a plethora of really positive effects that can be derived from consuming cannabis. Now, in high doses or in more of the recreational types of forms of administration, you can produce effects that are not positive. We'll just leave it at that. So in high doses, you may experience a paranoia, you may experience a high level of anxiety, you may actually even have hallucinations, you may have a toxic psychosis. Now, these things are bad, they don't sound good, and they're not good. So, what I'm on a mission to do is to really try to expose people to having a positive first experience with cannabis, consuming cannabis in low doses, to really, again, maximize the effect profile and reduce the negative side effects that could be present in consuming cannabis in high doses. So what do I look at when I think about cannabis in low doses? From my experience, if you go to a dispensary, you're going to get a lot of misinformation on this topic. So there's a wide variety of opinions in terms of what is a high dose of cannabis and what is a low dose of cannabis. Many people, this kind of makes sense because if you look at cannabis as medicine, it's a very personalized type of medicine. It affects you differently based on your own personal metabolism, based on the distribution of your endocannabinoid receptors, based on not comorbidities, but the presence of other concurrent drugs, etc., especially if you're ingesting cannabis via an oral administration. Other drugs that you may be consuming may be also processed by your liver. So it can affect people in dramatically different ways. So I understand sometimes why this isn't really kind of cut and dry regarding, what's a high dose, what's a low dose. In my experience, I define low dose as any product containing 5 milligrams or less of THC. Now, this could be a product that also contains other cannabinoids like CBD. Potentially, it could be a CBD-only product, right? So I really look at the barometer of low dosing as what is that level of THC? So for me, for low dosing, it's 5 milligrams or less of THC is going to be a dose that for the most part, people will respond positively to, again, maximizing that effect profile while reducing that side effect profile. So what is the way to get started with low dosing? There's a number of methods of administration that you can use to low dose. For me, in terms of what I recommend that people take a closer look at is oral forms of administration. Again, I am not a physician, so this is something that you are going to want to view on your own, get your education, take a look at, listen to the methods of administration segment. But broadly speaking, there are two types of methods of administration for consuming cannabis in the context of dosing in particular. I'd like to focus today on the oral administration, but you can also, and here's just a couple of examples again to keep things simple. This is a vape pen. And the way that this works is through the method of inhalation. This oil is extracted from the cannabis plant. Again, you're going to want to closely read labels. You're going to want to understand what's in your product. This vaporizing of cannabis is much harder to control the dose. There's a lot more variability. Everybody has different inhalation patterns, etc. The concentration of cannabinoids within the oils varies widely. This method of administration, this spray, on the other hand, is a much more controlled dose. It uses isolates of cannabinoids. So this particular product has THC isolated and CBD isolated. Again, you're going to want to closely read the labels, but in this example, this is an oral mucosal spray that you would just simply, open your mouth and spray it, pump into your mouth and hold it there for a bit. And this is 5 milligrams of THC and 5 milligrams of CBD per dose. So again, that would be classified as a low dose product. You might be thinking to yourself, well, what would be an example of when I would want to have the THC with the CBD? For example, if you're out there in the dispensary or you're looking at a delivery service and you're evaluating products, typically, again, these are generalizations, but if you are consuming a product that has both THC and CBD, it's going to be something where the effect, the presence of the CBD is actually going to work to mitigate the side effects of the THC. So for example, the way that these endocannabinoids work with your receptors, one sort of is the key to the receptor and one is the blocker of the receptor. So THC is the key, CBD is the blocker. You don't need one to activate the other. There's a lot of misinformation about that. The reason why a lot of products are produced using both THC and CBD is because of this effect of the components, the cannabinoids working together. This is not the entourage effect, okay? So you might hear about something called the entourage effect. The entourage effect is the idea that all the components of the cannabis plant working together produce a more benefit than isolates of the cannabis plant working alone, right? So when we talk about the research associated with the entourage effect, in particular the research done by Dr. Ethan Russo, this is talking about the full profile of the cannabis plant, right? All the cannabinoids, right? Not just THC, CBD, these are only two. It's the full profile of the cannabis plant, including the terpenes, the flavonoids, etc. And in previous segments, I've dived into this in a little bit more detail, so you can also, go back and review those sections. So in terms of low dosing, you're going to want to look for products that have clear labels. It's the number one thing to focus on. Oral forms of administration that have clear labeling. Read the labels closely. If the product has 5 milligrams or less of THC, again, generally speaking, it's going to be a good product for you to start experiencing the benefits of cannabis. Again, mood uplifting, euphoria, relaxation, anti-inflammatory, anti-pain, without getting the paranoia, the hallucinations, the anxiety. One of the topics that I get a lot of questions about is, okay, Kristie, how about appetite? I don't need to be having the munchies, etc. Again, the research is still coming, but generally speaking, consuming cannabis in low doses you're going to have a high level of control. You're going to have a discrete form of administration. You're not going to feel highly intoxicated. And by and large, you're not going to feel this rush of appetite stimulation that you kind of hear about with a lot of the stereotypes of cannabis users, out there with their bag of chips. It's not going to be something that you experience when you're consuming cannabis in low doses. If you have any concerns at all about the intoxication effects of using a product with THC, the good news is there are plenty of products on the market that do not contain any THC. So if this is a concern of yours for any reason, again, I am not a medical professional, and cannabis affects people in dramatically different ways based on, again, metabolism, the distribution of endocannabinoid cannabinoid receptors, etc. If you have any concerns about this, again, in the context of low dosing, I do not think that you're going to experience any negative effects with consuming cannabis with 5 milligrams or less of THC. However, if you do have any concerns, you can start by using a product that has CBD only. As I discussed in the methods of administration presentation or segment, one of the benefits of the oral administration is that it's easy to control, it's discreet, but it can also be titrated. And this is a great way to introduce yourself to low dosing. So say, for example, you try a low dose of CBD and it doesn't produce any effect for you, right? You're not going to get any intoxication, but let's say you don't really feel relaxed. Don't immediately think, oh, well, that CBD didn't work for me, right? Titrate the dose. If you selected a product, for example, that had 2 milligrams of CBD per dose, maybe you chose a oral mucosal spray like I was just showing, or maybe you chose a tincture, or maybe a low dose mint that has 2 milligrams of CBD. Take 2 mints the following day and see if that's something that produces a better effect for you. The thing about cannabis is that it's biphasic, which means that in higher doses, it can produce an opposite effect. So you want to titrate your dose responsibly, start low and slow, and by low and slow, I really mean low and slow. Someone was just telling me an anecdote of, one of my favorite products is these Petramints from a company called Kiva. They're 2.5 milligrams per mint. And I was hearing this story about someone taking 5 of these. And again, it's likely that if you were to take 5 in one sitting, and this was your first experience using cannabis, you might have an effect that would be negative, right? And something that you wouldn't necessarily be interested in taking cannabis again, ever. So again, the great thing about cannabis is that no dose is going to produce any type of lethal effect. So you're always going to be safe in that regard. But my mission is to make sure that everybody has a really positive experience using cannabis, that everybody is informed about the effects, the side effects, and looking closely at labels. So my recommendation, as I mentioned, would be starting low and slow. You can titrate the dose, and you can see how that cannabis is going to affect your body personally, because it truly is a personal form of medicine. All right, so that's just a little bit about low dosing. If you want to dive into more detail, take a look at our guide that provides a lot more background and information, and thank you for listening.